innovative ideas and knowledge sharing. This program is being organized in partnership with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So we have invited a very small group of people who are experts on the issues which we will be discussing today. And just a one-day program. It is sort of you know to solicit your ideas and your knowledge in understanding some of the important issues which are relevant for all the countries in South and Southeast Asia. And I will just, give you context from the name. You don't probably know, you cannot probably understand that what we are going to discuss. We will be discussing three issues, but in a way, these are interconnected, climate change, health, and technology. So just we have three sessions. I will just set the context and then I'll hand over to the chair of the first session. But I think, before we start, it would be good to introduce ourselves. Though some names are there, but it would be good to know each other. Um, I would like to request Mr. Shohidul Haq from there. Yes, if you can introduce.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Shahidul Haq. I'm from Bangladesh. I advise Foundation on the regional programs.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Aris, the Executive Director of Indonesia FinTech Associations, or to be short, called AFTEC. There's 300 of FinTech companies and also digital economy ecosystem in Indonesia. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Ravi Ranan Elia. I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for Health Policy. And we generally work in the area of health and social sector, social protection. And my background's mostly in the health, economics, financing, health systems context.
Hi, good morning. My name is Pranav Gupta from India. I work as a research associate at Just Jobs Network. Our work is primarily in gender, climate, skills, technology, and how these impact employment and jobs. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rifat Sabin Khan, and I support the foundation intervention by advising it. And I'm based in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Nice to meet you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julia Sato Bajracharya. I'm based in Kathmandu. I'm a senior analyst at Globesite, supporting the foundation, and also a non-resident fellow at the Nepal Institute for Policy Research. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadia, and I'm from the Center for Poverty Analysis, which is an independent think tank in Sri Lanka. And our work mostly is on multidimensional poverty, and my contribution is mostly on natural resources, livelihoods, and poverty.
Good morning. I am Makbul Morshid Ahmed. I am a faculty member, a professor in development and sustainability at the Asian Institute of Technology. It's a graduate school based in Bangkok, Thailand. Thank you.
Good morning once again. My name is Fahmida Khatun. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Policy Dialogue.
Good morning, everyone. I am Nilu Thapa. I'm associated in South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment as a treasurer.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sankar Suresta, Executive Director at Nepal Development Research Institute. My background by education is water resource engineering and management. And I'm also the alumni of AIT. So maybe nice to meet Professor Mokbul after a long time. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Muhammad Asif Iqbal. I work at Social Policy and Development Center in Pakistan, which is a think tank, and our areas of work span from pro-poor macroeconomic policies, social inequality, gender, climate change, and public finance.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fakhruddin Al-Kabir. I'm working as a senior research associate at the Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, colleagues. I'm Sanjay Srivastav. I'm the Chief of Disaster Risk Reduction at United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. My domain expertise, I have been a scientist myself a space climate related scientist, worked with Indian government, Indian space research organizations for 2 decades, and last 15 years with UNSCAP. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Preeti. I work as a program associate research at the Center for Policy Dialogue. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Pulas Singha. I'm a research fellow at the Institute of Policy Studies, and I work on labor, health, and education economics.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Kamal Solage. I work as a research associate for Nepal Development Research Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So just quickly give you some context, as I have mentioned earlier. In the recent decades, we have seen that South and Southeast Asian countries have been facing increasing vulnerability to the extreme weather events due to the impact of climate change. These climate change events have an impact on human lives and livelihoods. In South Asian countries like Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, they are also facing frequent cyclones, severe heat waves, floods, and longer dry periods, which disrupt agricultural production and cause severe water scarcity. And this also results in the displacement of thousands of people and damage to the public infrastructure. Similarly, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and in other Southeast Asian countries are also facing with heightened climate change induced risks from typhoons, flooding, and coastal erosion. As the impact of climate change are becoming severe, adaptation and mitigation efforts are increasingly becoming urgent issues across both the regions. And climate change is also causing the spread of vector-borne diseases like dengue, malaria, chikungunya by creating favorable conditions for mosquitoes. Besides, waterborne diseases such as cholera and diarrhea are becoming more common in flood prone areas in Bangladesh, India, and the Philippines. Hence, there is an urgent need for climate resilient health systems and public health interventions. In this case, universal health care can be a solution, yet the access to universal health care varies significantly across the regions. In South Asia, the Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka have higher health expenditures as a percentage of their gross domestic product. Current health expenditure as a percentage of GDP for the Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka are about 10%, 5.4%, and 4% respectively. These are the data from the World Health Organizations. But you are also, some of you are here, you can also share your ideas and the information on those. However, countries like Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan are facing challenges of disparities in healthcare access and quality in rural and urban areas. For instance, current health expenditure as a percentage of GDP in Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan are 2.36%, 3.28%, and 2.91% respectively, which are lower compared to other countries in the region. In Southeast Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Vietnam have made significant progress towards universal healthcare by bringing about 80%, 70, over 70%, and 68% of their population, respectively, under the universal healthcare services coverage. However, both regions face common challenges such as underdeveloped healthcare systems, skilled workforce shortages, and the need for infrastructure development. For advancing universal healthcare services, strengthening primary healthcare, engaging community health workers, and promoting public-private partnerships are crucial. As both regions continue to prioritize health system reforms, regional cooperation and knowledge sharing will play a vital role in enhancing healthcare delivery and achieving universal health coverage for all. The use of technology and digital inclusion holds immense potential to drive economic growth by creating employment opportunities for the youth population. Technology can transform traditional job sectors and create new ones by facilitating remote work, freelancing, and participation in the global economy. E commerce and social media also offer platforms for youth to develop entrepreneurship with minimal startup costs. In this case, digital inclusion plays a crucial role in creating employment opportunities through the use of technology. Digital inclusion empowers the youth through education and skills development, and online learning platforms and vocational training courses can provide critical digital skills like coding, data analysis, um, and web development, and also cybersecurity. As Southeast Asia embraces digital transformation, there is also the potential for growth in emerging industries such as artificial intelligence and blockchain and green technology. These fields offer forward looking job opportunities that require a tech savvy workforce, and the region's youth at the forefront of this transition if they are equipped with adequate skills and access to technology. So, exchange of ideas and knowledge sharing for creating employment opportunities through the use of technology in South and Southeast Asia can serve as a platform for governments, private sector leaders, academic institutions, and civil society to address the employment challenges and explore technological solutions. So, the three issues I would say that, as I have mentioned, these are interconnected. Technology can be used also to address the challenges of climate change and also the healthcare system. It can improve the healthcare system and the efficiency and access both. So we have three sessions in these lines. One would be on climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts in the South and Southeast Asia. The second session would be on regional cooperation and knowledge sharing on the universal health and healthcare system. And the third session will be on employment creation through technology in South and Southeast Asia. And we would expect this is sort of an informal discussion, so we would expect a really, frank and candid and open discussions so that we have a better understanding of the issues related to climate change adaptation and mitigation, and also the universal healthcare services, employment creation, all these. And also we have a better understanding, better knowledge, and we can also learn about the best practices and the lessons in the region, which can be also replicated in our respective countries. And that's why we would also, look forward to have some concrete recommendations for the policymakers as well, because at the end of the day, it is the policymakers who would be implementing, and we would suggest these recommendations to them so that they can take some measures. So with this, I would like to once again thank you and welcome to this discussion session. The first session, as I have mentioned, that it will be on climate change adaptation and mitigation efforts in South and Southeast Asia. So this session will be moderated by Ms. Nilu Thapa, who is a board member and treasurer of South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, Nepal. Over to you, Nilu.
Thank you. Thank you, Famida. Welcome everyone to this session on climate adaptation and mitigation. And reiterating what Famida said, I would like to invite you all for an open, candid, and fruitful discussion here, so that the purpose is fulfilled for this meeting. Before I start, I've just said, the structured this session. Like we will have 5 minutes each for the panelists for their initial remarks, and then we will have the floor discussion, which is almost about 35 minutes, and then for the closing remarks, I have allocated 2 minutes for the each speakers, in which they will answer the questions that was raised on the floor, as well as they can add on to their initial remarks also. And I have set myself 10 minutes altogether for moderating this session. So with that, just to set the context on climate change, climate adaptation and mitigation, it's become a new imperative in our development efforts these days, which are further reinforced by sustainable development goals. And the fact that South and Southeast Asia are highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change reinforces the need to work on this issue even more. Despite historically making minimal contributions, we are the ones we meaning the South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries are facing the disproportionate impacts from climate change. And we in South Asia, we already have a gamut of problems to solve. And on top of that, we have to tackle climate change now. And we need to grow, our economies need to grow, but it is at the cost of degradation of the environment. So here we need to strike a balance between growth and minimizing the adverse effects on the environment at the same time. The forecast that the adverse economic impacts of climate change in South Asia will surpass the global averages primarily because of our dependency on agriculture. Agriculture plays a crucial role in our regional economy. So, food security is a challenge, securing finance is a challenge. Not only securing finance, but where to put this finance, whether in adaptation or in mitigation, is also a challenge. And creating a balance between these two is a challenge for us. So in this session, we will we hope to touch upon the agricultural practices adopted to combat climate change and their effectiveness, the key barriers to adopting the climate resilient agriculture practices and the ways they can be addressed. Also, not in only the agriculture sector, but how do adaptation and mitigation strategies support the long-term sustainability of the manufacturing sector. The strategies that South Asian and Southeast Asian countries employ to mobilize climate finance from both domestic and international sources to support their climate adaptation and mitigation goals. And also our favorite topic of how regional cooperation among South and Southeast Asian countries can strengthen smart strategies to address climate challenges, such as increased flooding and extreme weather events, and the joint initiatives that these countries can undertake to promote renewable energy, reforestation, natural disaster preparedness, and sustainable urban planning. On top of these, the SARC Agriculture Center in Dhaka has a potentially pivotal role to play in agriculture-related climate adaptation. While overall progress of SARC, as we know, has been extremely slow, hasn't been satisfactory, but it's not that nothing is moving forward. A case in point is that the recent, I think it was recent only, the establishment and operation of consortium for scaling of climate smart agriculture in South Asia under the aegis of SARC Agriculture Center based in Dhaka. What other initiatives can be advanced under the center may also be a question worth pondering by the experts in this roundtable. Against this background, I would like to invite Dr. Mohammad Asif Iqbal, Managing Director, Social Policy and Development Center, Pakistan. He has 20 years of experience in research and policy analysis and has worked on issues of governance, public finance, and social service delivery. So if you want to add anything more to the introduction that I have prepared, you're most welcome to do so. And that goes for the other panelists as well. If you want to add anything about your organization or yourself, please do. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I have 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, great. So, okay, I'll try to set the context for the further discussion in 5 minutes. First of all, we need to say where do we stand in terms of vulnerability or in terms of adaptation and mitigation. So there is you all know there is a very famous index, which is the Notre Dame Global Adaptation Initiative. They've been working very extensively on this issue, and they rank different countries, all the countries, 192 countries, in two key dimensions of adaptation. One is vulnerability and the other is readiness. So vulnerability captures exposure, sensitivity in terms of that a country is dependent on one sector that is uh, vulnerable to hazards, and also the proportion of population that is vulnerable and of adaptive capacity. Then in terms of readiness, economic readiness, this is mainly the business environment, that is ability of the business environment to accept investment that can be applied for adaptation, governance issues, and social. So what we see here, 222 index. So most out of 192 countries, if you see that we are in the lower half, and particularly if you see Cambodia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they are bottom 25 in the bottom 25% of the countries, and most of the countries starting from Bhutan, India, Sri Lanka, Philippines, so they all are in the lower half. And this is a matrix that show the aspects of vulnerability and readiness. So if you go from bottom from left to right, readiness increases, and if you go from bottom to up in the vulnerability index, so that means that you're more vulnerable. So what we see here, that almost half of the country of South Asia, more than that, are in this red or pink block: Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, Laos, Cambodia, Philippines. That means their vulnerability is high and readiness is low. There are some examples like Sri Lanka, India, Vietnam. Their vulnerability is as high as the other, but there are indicators that they seem to be more ready to accept the challenge. Then we have some good example: Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. Singapore, of course, Singapore is, but there is also, we have to see that when some countries are performing good or bad, so what was their starting point? So starting point of Singapore was not that bad, like 20 years ago or so. So this is from 2005 to 22. So what we can see: Indonesia, India, Nepal, Philippines, and Vietnam, Malaysia, they are kind of relatively, they have performed well relative to other countries of South Asia and Southeast Asia. So I would like to hear more from the representative of the respective countries, that what has caused this good performance. There must be some initiatives, some other things. So it would be interesting to hear from other countries, like how Indonesia, India, Nepal, or Philippines, or Vietnam, Malaysia, they have done well as compared to other countries in the region. So in terms of adaptation, what we see, particularly in South Asia, that it has mostly been reactive to the situation. Just to give you a few examples, like in case of Bangladesh, after the cyclone of 2009, then there was a project on repairing and building infrastructure. Similarly, in response to 2017 floods, there was emergency relief provision. Similarly, in the case of India, what we see, the drought relief program in response to drought in 2015-16. In the case of Nepal, the landslide risk reduction, that would like to hear from Nepali friend as well. So in the case of Pakistan, what we have seen, that after 2010 flood response and recovery program was initiated. These are good initiatives, but these are mostly reactive, not proactive. But there are some good examples, like we see in Philippines. They have this climate change commission, which report directly to country's president, and they have also involved local government to have this adaptation strategies. In India, what we see, National Solar Mission, green bond is very good example. In the case of India, the resilience bond to attract investment. I think India is the only country, if I'm not wrong, in our region to have this green bonds. In Pakistan, we have seen two things: billion tree afforestation program and renewable energy. But now this maybe in the discussion I can talk more on renewable energy, particularly the solar options in Pakistan. Bangladesh, we have Bangladesh Climate Change Resilient Fund, coastal program. In Sri Lanka, it's very success. I mean, in literature, what we see is very successful program. Maybe we can hear from Sri Lankan colleague, the National Disaster Insurance Scheme that provides assistance to the people who are affected. In Thailand, energy efficiency plan. In Indonesia, green growth. So these are some examples that we can discuss that how they have. And of course, mitigation, we all know that the Paris Agreement is the main coordination mechanism in addition to the nationally determined contribution that we call it NDCs. So there are two major issues. One is that countries differ substantially in type of commitments they have extended in their nationally determined contribution. And also in many cases, not all, but in many cases, the national targets are heavily dependent on bilateral or multilateral support. A good example is from India. They have unconditionally committed to 33 to 35% reduction in carbon emission. Bangladesh, they committed only 5% reduction. Maldives, 26, but it's conditional commitment. Similarly, in Pakistan, they have 35% reduction as a conditional, but 15% unconditional. So there is a mixed response from the countries. Like some of are conditional to the international support. And one important aspect, maybe we can elaborate more on the discussion, that the community-led initiative. So there has been increasingly, we see the recognition that indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, they have a term, this IKLK, it can play a very important role in adaptation and mitigation as well. Just to give you 2-3 examples, in Bali, this was implied for identification of indigenous crop species for agriculture, and it contributed a lot to the economy of local people. Then in Chiang Mai province of Thailand, so older people's club began to develop biocard, which were to address the environmental issues. Maybe our colleague from Thailand can elaborate on that as well. In Bangladesh, in Mangla Salam communities, they joined hand with mayor's office to identify locally led solutions. So these are some examples, and maybe it would be interesting to hear from our colleagues. So the way forward, I think one is the political will of respective governments. We all know that in South Asia, mostly developing countries, they don't have budgets. But I mean, there has to be political will. Money is not always, should not always be the barrier. So if there is a will, there is a way. So I think we need to think beyond the budgetary constraint, because if, for example, in the case of Pakistan, we know that there are constraints, but we also know that there are options available to shift. Or if we have the priority fixed, then we can shift money from one sector to the other sector. And one major issue that many developing countries they face is the corruption in the government sector. I mean, for example, if we have a annual development program of 1,000 billions, so there are several studies to indicate that 25 to 30% goes to corruption. So if it can be addressed with institutional reforms, so that money can be available. And of course, regional cooperation and knowledge sharing is important.
Raised country-wise. I'm sure it's going to be addressed in due course of our session. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Makbul Morsad Ahmed, who is a professor in Development Planning Management and Innovation in the School of Environment Resources and Development at AIT Thailand. He is involved in teaching and research on international development, NGOs, community development, and adaptation to climate change. Over to you, Dr. Ahmed.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Makbul Ahmed. Once again, thanks to the organizers for inviting me. My short presentation, I came to know that I do not have more than 5 minutes, so I'll skip a number of slides. Please forgive me for that. And my about that also. We work in AIT, including me, on climate finance, and at the same time, some of the policy issues maybe I can discuss more in the discussion and session. At the same time, I really thank Dr. Asif that he has set the scene. You have seen the presentation from him. What I will do, I will mostly highlight the issue of technology. What technologies are being, tried in case of South and Southeast Asia, being a regional graduate school. And I will mostly argue, if you allow me, is that our performance is not very good. Perhaps to some people, to some of our colleagues, it is mixed. Let me see how it looks like. Very quickly, just to show you that technology issues that I will do mostly two. First, adaptation, then mitigation. So, as Dr. Asif has started, have shown very well the issue of the the challenges, mostly in three areas. I think most of you know that: science, adaptation, mitigation. South and Southeast Asia, I think, are really struggling in all three areas. And if I had time, I could show you some of the recent work. People are ranking countries in terms of these three areas. I think a major limitation is, of course, the science. And I will come back to that when I talk about heat wave and the issues in a few minutes. Just let me very quickly go through one or two recent technologies which are being discussed in case of technology for adaptation. This is the case of the mostly in the coastal area, mangrove areas that we have been trying with a number of partner countries. So it is mangrove based the soil erosion, at the same time salinity affected areas. This is a technology which is being tried for a couple of years. Once again, the same story, not much scale up. It needs to analysis at the same time, checking whether it is suitable for the other countries, other coastal areas. So this is one example how technologies are being tried at the same time they are facing limitation. Let me go to save time. This is the example. You just go for the bamboo revetment effort for coastal areas. You can see some evolution. Indonesia, for example, our partner countries, our organizations are doing that to deal with coastal erosion. Floating agriculture, I'm sure most of you heard about that. I think most of you know about the limitation of the floating agriculture. It is also another technology, adaptation technology, widely tried, but at the same time, scaling up is an issue. Now, if you allow me, just going to another example, the case of agricultural insurance, which I think those who know about IPCC work, agricultural insurance is widely argued as a way out for, particularly for the large number of, particularly middle and small farmers. So it has its own advantages, but it is not new. Agricultural insurance is in discussion for a couple of decades now, but I think time has come to give a closer look at it, how we can deal with that, how we can reach out to the most vulnerable population, particularly the smallholders. The case of heat wave, another example. I think all of you know that the case of heat wave is a serious issue, and I must say that we in AIT, we were the pioneers in terms of the first, about 20 years ago, we started the work with a number of partner universities and think tanks about the heat wave and those cases, particularly the most vulnerable population, construction workers, slum dwellers, particularly in North India. To some people, this is one of the first set of works were done. All of you know about the heat issue. So we prepared the heat action plan, and I think it is already late to deal with heat wave and its consequences, particularly most vulnerable population like old, children, and of course, construction workers and others. So this is another adaptation technology which has to be immediately, tried and perhaps more work on this has to be done. I'm just sharing with you some of our updates in Ahmedabad, which we have just finished. This is the issue of, because you cannot avoid it. It is now clear. At the same time, what are the way outs? One of them is to early warning system and everything for heat waves, for example. So now let us go very quickly, because of time, sorry, about the issue of mitigation. What we are seeing now, I think, as Dr. Asif has rightly pointed out, what is the challenge? We have to deal with emission. One of the major way outs is, of course, technological intervention. We have to reduce emission. And there are a number of cases. This is the case of Thailand, how in the recent studies, the public opinion talked about it. Of course, we are part of it, so we can talk about that. Actually, we are doing a number of works with a number of regional, universities to see how people deal with this issue of particularly the case of alternative technologies, and particularly, say, for example, the case of alternative energy. Thailand, you can see the case of Thailand, how Thailand is trying to make its plan and trying to implement it in terms of the mitigation technologies, from solar panel to all those things. Long way to go. But there are some success stories. That's just to show you the case of electric car, for example. I'm sure most of you know in South Asia what is the picture, quite worrying picture about electric car, for example. Just a good example to understand. Just to, I will request you to consider the comparison with a country like Thailand, how Thailand is doing, particularly in 3 areas of electric car: the plug-in, hybrid, at the same time battery-driven music. Both electric car and also 3-wheeler, and of course motorcycle. So this is an example to understand how we can do both. First, the issue of fiscal measures, at the same time prioritizing technological intervention in R&D, for example. Both have to be done. So you can see here how we can go into detail about this, how government's fiscal policy could create incentive for new technology or technologies. But at the same time, there are examples to see how long these countries or these economies will take, and perhaps the people of those countries will take to adopt new technologies and benefit from that. That is very important for both adaptation and mitigation. So if we talk about climate change technology, it has a number of core areas which I think we need to work on immediately. For example, understanding those things, the prioritizing the technologies, knowing their advantages, disadvantages, at the same time, just to see over the timeline, what is the possibility of a certain technology to survive or to flourish. Some, I'm sure, will not survive. So we need to understand in this way, as I mentioned to you. So just to update from our work, we have a climate technology center here in EIT. I mean, so involved in that. We are trying to see how technologies are evolving in a number of countries, in a number of research organizations, and of course by corporate sector. But at the same time, I think time has come to see, particularly make the policymakers aware the possible technologies, and at the same time to prioritize, at the same time then to check the most vulnerable population should benefit from that. That is very important. But at the same time, as I told you, the picture is a bit mixed. We are seeing another scenario which is quite worrying. You can see in this graph a number of Southeast Asian countries are going back to fossil fuel. Renewable energy is a talk of the time, isn't it? But the picture is not that encouraging, perhaps quite worrying. But of course, you can see here the performance one, as I think Dr. Asif has started showing that to us. But where are we now? How long shall we take? So this is very important. I think time has come to have a more detailed analysis. I mean, I think this type of pictures, we are seeing now, perhaps we'll go more towards the clear benefit that people, communities will gain from particular technology, particular change in their lifestyle, so that the livelihoods finally improve. If it doesn't, people will not adopt the technology. I mean, I can update you about our recent results. They will not. At the same time, perhaps maybe the ones like non-renewable energy will continue. Perhaps there are issues and to be worried about. And one of the major concern is from the policymakers. Unless they are convinced of the economic benefits of the new technologies, probably they will not be interested too strongly to work for those. So I'll stop here. Yeah. So to save time. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed, for being so conscious about the time, because that's what we are short of always. And now I would like to invite Dr. Sanjay Srivastava, Chief Disaster Risk Reduction at UNSCAP, Thailand. He leads and guides ESCAP's analytical policy research on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation that feeds into the UN intergovernmental meetings, negotiations, and agreements. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Dr. Khatun, for giving me this opportunity. I will share some of my thoughts based on our flagship publication, Asia Pacific Disaster Report, A State of Climate Asia and Southwest Pacific. Uh, Let me tell you the innovative ideas and knowledge sharing, how critical they are in the present context. The chairperson in the beginning highlighted flag two issues: climate, health, and agriculture. So I thought, why not I take me and do a little deep dive from the innovation ideas and knowledge sharing perspective. So let's see the health, the climate risk and health. There is a very direct relationship, all of you know very well. But this relationship is much more intense in those areas where there is a nexus of what we call climate, disaster, and health. The climate that triggers disaster, disaster that triggers health or epidemic. So this is what is called nexus. And all put together, you call the health system in a multi-hazard risk area. So that kind of nexus is quite prevalent in South Asia. You look at GBM, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna Basin, you look at Indus Basin, those nexus are quite a bit. Then the other part, you look at climate interfaced with agriculture. That's at another important nexus. Climate impacts agriculture, then food system, water, and then comes to energy because there are many hydroelectric power plants in South Asia. So this becomes a agri-food systems. So you see the climate is at the core, climate risk. One system, health system, that is triggered by this. Another system, food system, triggered by the climate risk. Now what to do from the innovation and the knowledge point of view to address this nexus, right? So there are way forwards. One way forward is there is a paradigm shift globally, thanks to many of the climate level related negotiations, sharing good practices. The shift is countries are moving. If you look at the national adaptation plans, many of the South Asia, for example, they are moving away from a sector uh, to system approach, food system approach, nexus approach, water, food, energy, access. So this is a very important shift. This is a truly innovative from agri system, because the agri system is not standalone. It is associated with many other sectors together. So that's the paradigm shift that is taking place. But in this process, to make these paradigms happen, to operationalize this at country level, this is where the innovative ideas and knowledge becomes so critical. Let me share some thought from the experiences of our flagship publications. What is at the center of the knowledge is understanding of the climate risk. Is a quite dynamic, quite complex, and putting this into the policy actions. When you develop your policy plan, the risk has to be figured into it. As of now, we always go by GDP. Our country should grow 5%, 6% GDP, and that becomes your driving force. But when you take climate risk also into the consideration, this becomes a resilient growth strategy, and that's where the need of the world. Now, if I tell you, let us say agriculture, for example, if you look at risk in agriculture sector, the risk is at every stage, right from the sowing to flowering, harvesting, production to consumption, every stage. So you need a risk understanding of agri-food system, not risk of agricultural crop. So this is where you need all your innovation to factor risk in moving from sector to system approach. How it can be done? Let me cite 3 examples. One example is what we have done in ISCA. I will request that have a look through. We have a risk and resilience portal. What it has done, it has taken all IPCC complex CMIP6 model, country specific, a 100 kilometer by 100 kilometer grid data set is down a scale to 5 kilometer. In case of Bhutan, it is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. It's a computationally very complex task. It's a real innovations. Down a scale 100 kilometer to 2 kilometer without losing the granularity of the information. So we have done this to country level in few country. So have a look at those portals, data portals. This is the true innovations. This gives you the risk what exists today, what it will exist at 2.0 degree warming and further. So this is the innovation which has to go into plan. Two country specific examples, Thailand for example, the health and climate part. Thailand has been champion. They have brought what they call Bangkok principle of health aspect of the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction. How health and climate can be coupled together through early warning systems, through the public health policies. They have identified the hotspots within Thailand where this nexus is quite means evidently clear. So take those areas where this nexus happen and do introduce this Bangkok principle into the planning efforts. The last but not the least, I must, because the chairperson told about all this digital AI applications, employment generation, how it can be done. We looked at many examples. One example that is struck to mind is the recent one, India example. They have introduced digital public infrastructure in agriculture. This is truly innovative. It has 3 pillars. If I tell you one pillar, what they call agri-stack. Agri-stack is they have Aadhaar system, which is an identity system. Now agri-stack brings identity of a farmer. So this agri-stack is identity of farmers along with his land records, the geo-tagging of his villages, his land holdings. So identity of farmers with all his assets as well as vulnerability together. So you see, you digitalize an individual, a small marginal farmer with all his assets, vulnerability, exposure, everything. And then this is coupled in the same platform with a decision support system. This farmer, if it experiences drought, what decision he has to make? One very good example I thought I must cite is the parametric insurance. There is no much success story of parametric insurance except few in Mongolia, few in Africa. But here, digital stack brings, if the rainfall goes a certain threshold in drought prone area, the farmer will automatically becomes entitled for payment, and within 20 minutes, that's what in pilot cases they have demonstrated, the money of parametric insurance will come to his bank account. So that's a very seamless transfer of, this is the best example of the data science with AI, which is like a parametric trigger. And finally, the third pillar of this is a soil health card, how he should adapt to a, let us say, in a case of drought or flood, he has a soil which has certain inherent limitations. So what could be done from the government side to incentivize soil? Now in doing this agri-stack creation, decision support development, you create huge employment opportunity because this is a digital agriculture where the data on farm, on individual farmers creates the army of startups, entrepreneurs down the line. And these are the way forward. These applications are not only in agriculture, it will have multiple spin-offs. And this is how you create the digital empowerment agriculture sector as one of the window of the opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Srivastava. That was an excellent presentation on your part. with so many, you've brought many issues in the forefront. Now, I would like to call Dr. Shankar Shrestha, Executive Director, Nepal Development Research Institute. He has more than 14 years of experience in the areas of water, agriculture, and environment. Over to you, Dr. Shrestha.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you, Dr. Famida and the CPD team for this opportunity to participate in this consultation workshop for this wonderful project, I think in collaboration with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this is also very interesting for me because we at NDRI are also doing a similar project under the FCDO and IDRC funded CLEAR initiatives, where in addition to the climate change and gender, we are also looking at the components of the economics of the climate change and its distribution over. So I think we are just starting that project, and in the next year or so, we'll be happy to have a cross-learning experience with CPD team next year when our project also goes on. So I just want to highlight this one. This is our similar what we have been doing. And for today's deliberation, I was informed to talk a bit more on the climate change, focusing on the sustainable agriculture practices. So I would like to stick to that part, and maybe for other energy and other parts should be covered by the other panelists. So I have divided my presentations in a five parts. First is the context. Second is the sustainable agriculture practices. I want to list some of those relevant in Nepal and maybe some South Asian countries, and also some of the successful case studies of these practices. And yesterday there was a parallel session on the climate resilient agriculture in the SAIS. So I also like to share some of the insights from that session. I think Dr. Pulasti was there in that session. It was a wonderful session. We can take the insights from there as well. And finally, the barriers and the way forward that we can discuss. Hope I'll be able to complete this in 5 minutes. Because I'm also from the Japanese education institution background, and in Japan, crossing 5 minutes is a crime. If so, I have started my timer. So please, I will try to be a bit fast and on time. So, as you know, the agriculture practices and the climate change, it's like interlinked. The poor agriculture practices will be contributing to the emission of the greenhouse gases, which in turns will the climate change. And again, the climate change will impact the crop yield and there's some other things. So it's like an interconnection. And to address that in various South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries, there has been policies has been formulated. Like government of Nepal has a long-term strategy for the net zero emission. We have a recently 16th five-year plan, and also NAP in every country's NDCs. They talk about this climate resilient agriculture systems. So in this context, I think some of the very popular, effective, sustainable agriculture practices in Nepal, especially, and maybe in the region, are I would like to list just 6. One is the zero tillage system. We say where we do a minimum tillage to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So second one is the IPM, we call the integrated pest management, where it's like a mix of the chemical fertilizer comes on the last option. So there is like a mix of organic and other systems. Similarly, the third one is the SRI, that is the system for rice intensification, where in contrast to the year-round flooding, we have a limited intermittent irrigation system that is maybe it's most popular in the Philippines. Then again, Nepal and other South Asian countries are also adopted. Similarly, there is a technology called SALT, sloping agriculture land technologies, where it's like intercropping between the nitrifying what is it that crops and the other crop system, nitrogen fixing crops and the other crops, and so on. Similarly, there is one of the maybe manure, or what to say, it's called a biochar. It's produced in a very controlled system, heating system, and this is said to be a bit effective in the production of the agriculture crops. And finally, the resistant varieties like drought tolerant varieties or some insect pest tolerant varieties. This has been in practice in various regions in Nepal and in the region. So among this, maybe I would like to highlight some of the very key case studies. Like in 2020 in Haryana, the zero tillage system was adopted, and this led to an increase of around 500 kg per hectare of wheat production. So that was a success example. Similarly, for the case of Nepal, in the far western Nepal, the wheat production with the zero tillage farming, the wheat production, the profit was increased by US dollar 150 per hectare. So that was the one of the studies. And for the IPM integrated pest management in the some of the districts in the far in the western part of Nepal, like they did for the some cases for the tomato and cauliflower, and it showed that the plots where it was IPM was adapted, the production was increased compared to the control system. Similarly, for the biochar applications, it was done in 2016 by Nepal Agriculture Research Council. It's called NARC. Under that, that was the ADB funded project where Ministry of Agriculture was also involved. And in that, the biochar application was piloted in the 10 districts, and the result was the yield was higher in that 10 districts compared to the control system. So, and other is the resistant varieties, like in I think in Southeast Asia, the genetically modified that crops are also in place, but in Nepal that is not legal. But we have our own traditional plant breeding approaches, and we have a drought tolerant varieties or some insect disease tolerant varieties that is done by the research Nepal Agriculture Research Council. So some of the success examples are I want to highlight such examples. So now I would like to talk on the insight from the yesterday's session on climate resilient agriculture. I think Dr. Pulasti was there, so he's aware of that. But I want to highlight that there was a discussion on a very success example of climate smart village in that was adopted in 20 countries. This is done by the CGIAR groups of the Agriculture and Food Security, which is called SICAPS. Yeah? So in Nepal, it's a very success example, and the government of Nepal has also taken this in as a NAP or as an NDC program. That was discussed yesterday. So this could be also a very good initiative. Similarly, the secretary from the Ministry of Agriculture yesterday mentioned about the use of digital technology for precision agriculture. That is in our policies, but the implementation part we need to see. Similarly, there was also one issue raised about the not only the production but the post-harvest loss reduction is also very important in overall sustaining this climate resilient agriculture system. And I'm also pleased to say that in this post-harvest loss reduction, we have just started one feasibility study at NDRI, so we'll be able to share more findings next year, where we are using a one cold plasma technology to treat the harvested crops so that it does not get rotten too early. So this technology is widely common in US. I think it's in Bangladesh also there is a center for that. In South Asia, India, there's many things, but in Nepal it's not yet. So we are checking the feasibility of that technology, whether it's feasible in Nepal. So we'll be able to tell that by next year. So yeah, I want to highlight these things from yesterday's session and some of our own research. And these are some of the practices we are going, but there are of course the barriers and the way forward we need to look at. I think it's already highlighted before. The policy are very good, but the implementation part is very weak, and especially we have an ambitious target of around 47 point something billion US dollar, that is by 2050 in the NAP of Nepal for the climate finance part, and agriculture covers the 11.2 billion US dollar. So how to secure that is also one of the challenge, and I think yeah, we need to walk in that um, direction. And also yesterday I also had a wonderful thing that I noted, that one of the speakers mentioned about in these conferences like SciS and other conferences, we only focus on the policy makers or something like that, but we need to also involve the policy users, that are the farmers itself. So because last year I had a chance to visit Karnataka in a village called Dharwad, where this was one of the unique conference of its kind, where they invited the farmers as well in the technical session. So because as Dr. Asif mentioned, the capacity building is also very important as a way forward, and the farmers, they should be also a part of this process in addition to the policy makers. Yeah, so in short, I would like to highlight this at this moment, and sorry for exceeding by 3 minutes.
You will not be penalized, Dr. Shrestha. It's not a crime. This is not. This is Nepal. So, but I don't want to encourage that to the other panelists as well, because we are actually running out of time. So now I would like to invite Ms. Saima William, Program Lead, Climate Action Center for Peace and Development Initiatives in Pakistan. She has more than 15 years of experience, and our focus areas include climate action, disaster risk reduction, and climate resilience. Over to you, Ms. Saima William.
Thank you very much, Nilu. So first of all, I would like to thank Center for Peace, Center for Dialogue, Policy Dialogue, and the organizers of this event for providing me this opportunity to share critical insights and Pakistan's perspective, basically in particular, and South Asia in general. So I would be sharing the perspective from Pakistan on climate change mitigation and adaptation. So a very good morning to all my fellow panelists, moderator, and the guests. Um, uh, as we navigate climate challenges, the importance of adoption of sustainable practices and fostering regional cooperation, I think, cannot be overstated. Pakistan, much like rest of the South Asian countries, is also at a critical juncture in addressing the climate vulnerabilities. I would like to start with the climate smart agricultural practices, some barriers, and then the broader role of mitigation and adaptation strategies in order to secure a resilient future for South Asia. In Pakistan, climate smart agricultural practices are gaining momentum at the moment, and initiatives like drip irrigation and water sprinkling methods and solar powered water pumps and salt tolerant crops. All these initiatives are helping small farmers to adapt to changing climatic conditions, mostly in the regions like Sindh and South Punjab of Pakistan. Pakistan has also come up with National Agriculture Emergency Program, and there is also a National Agriculture Policy Framework, which help to institutionalize these efforts. But still some significant challenges still remain, like the fragmented land ownership and lack of financial resources for small farmers and limited access to modern technology. I think these are some of the barriers, not just for Pakistan, for across South Asia. And weak institutional capacity to implement climate smart practices, climate smart policies actually intensify these issues. And to address these challenges, I will strongly recommend that we must prioritize regional knowledge sharing platforms like this for research on climate smart crops and pool resources, not just financial but technical resources to carry out researches. And also, there is need to Pakistan can also strengthen its farmer outreach program, and we can also subsidize, and we should subsidize access to modern technology like drip irrigation equipment and other equipments needed for climate smart agriculture. And we should invest in the community based knowledge to enhance resilience at the community level. Then I also would like to touch base, because there are some sectoral adaptation and mitigation in initiatives apart from the agricultural practices. In manufacturing, I think the transition to clean energy is crucial. And if we take example of Pakistan's effort like Jhampir wind corridor in Sindh, I think this sole project is able to generate around 50,000 megawatt electricity, which is almost the double of peak energy demand of Pakistan. So, as I said earlier, that Pakistan has a huge, immense potential of renewable energy. Only solar energy potential is around 2.9 million megawatt, and our Pakistan's wind energy potential is around 100,000 megawatt. So similarly, not only Pakistan but entire South Asia holds immense renewable energy potential. Like Pakistan, Nepal, and Bhutan, they are very rich in hydropower. So I think if we harness this renewable energy potential, the entire South Asia will not be only able to meet its domestic energy demands, but it will be able to export surplus energy to the neighboring countries. Such renewable energy projects like Jimpir one, they exemplify that harnessing renewable energy sources cannot only reduce the carbon footprints, sectoral carbon footprints, but it can also attract investors. Some again challenges persist in this area as well, the grid connectivity issues and lack of technical expertise, and sometimes initial cost is very high that hinder progress. In order to be successful to harness renewable energy at the South Asian level, there are some challenges and we need to address them. Not only in Pakistan, the transmission and distribution infrastructure is outdated, and it is it will not be supportive to for the variability of renewable energy sources. But the transmission cross border transmission infrastructure is also very limited, that limit energy trade. So we need to invest in the infrastructure, distribution infrastructure, not only at domestic level but at the regional level. And then there are policy and regulatory mismatches. So policies and regulations of each country do not match with other South Asian countries. So we need to come up with the matching policies and regulations. And of course, we need to address some political sensitivities that hinder progress. There have been historical tensions among South Asia, which are actually the underlying cause to that restrict regional collaboration. But we need integrated policies at regional level that could combine financial incentives for big investors at regional level infrastructure, and along with the and regional cooperation and knowledge sharing. I think this is the key. Without that, it's not possible. Without that, it will be just a dream. And I also would like to touch base some of the areas like some shared issues. South Asia's interconnected issues like frequent flooding and extreme weathers, they actually demand shared solutions. There have been some regional treaties like the Indus Water Treaty, though it is very limited and it's not as operational or beneficial as it needs to be, but still it serves as a foundation for a transboundary water management. So I think like that we need to establish a shared early warning systems and disaster preparedness, and come up with the joint frameworks. Only then we will be able to come up as a region, and our efforts will not be fragmented. Otherwise, the efforts in isolation are not going to reap anything. And again, in the case of climate finance, tapping international climate finance have always been challenge for the South Asian countries. It is a challenge for Pakistan and at the regional level as well. And I think for that, instead of fragmented and isolated efforts, we need to join in hands together, and we need to tap those funds collectively, and we also need to work on our technical capacity buildings, because of course those international funds, they require high standards, high reporting standards, high project proposals, and they have high data requirements. So we need to keep our efforts at the parallel level. At one level, we need to establish our own South Asian Climate Fund, and at the same level, we cannot give up on the international funds. We have to tap those funds as well, and for that we need to work on our capacities. So we need to come up with the matching capacities to tap those funds. But I always say, this is also my argument for the organizers who of course
We'll
manage
have to
those
wrap
funds.
up now, Sai.
Okay, just one or two lines. They need to keep balance between, high standards and the provision of those funds. These are actually for the vulnerable, so those international funds should be available to the most vulnerable during the most difficult times, while maintaining high standards. For the climate funds, there have been allegations to South Asian countries, as one of my fellow panelists mentioned, that around 30 to 35% of funds falls victim to corruption. So there are corruption risks. There are some true allegations of like bad governance. So we need to work on the transparent use of funds is the key. So good governance, transparency, and these are crucial to regain the trust at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saima. Now we have the last panelist of this session, Ms. Nadia Azmi. I believe she must be the youngest of this panel. Research professional at Center for Poverty Analysis, Sri Lanka. Her research mainly focuses on climate change and adaptation to socio-ecological change in fishing communities. Over to you, Ms. Azmi.
Thank you so much. So I'm actually here representing Karen Fernando from SEPA, but I hopefully in my 5 minutes will be able to share the perspective from the ground. As one of our panelists also said, having farmers and having the people who are actually recipients of our policies and these discussions is really important. So I'll be sharing a little bit on how climate change is impacting fisheries communities, agricultural communities, as well as people in more tea plantations, and insights that I'm getting that we're finding in Sri Lanka. But I'll mostly set the context for agriculture households and communities. And I'll also share some of our learnings from some projects that we're implementing on how can we be more inclusive when we have climate change adaptation projects in the field. So I'd like to kind of start by setting this context of the fact that climate change and social systems are connected, and we can't really separate this. And this dualism of thinking about climate drivers of change and social drivers of change sometimes kind of leads to a disconnect when it comes to implementing projects and adaptation, and also could lead to a high level of exclusion and maladaptation. So I want to kind of, through some examples on climate change impacts in the agriculture sector in Sri Lanka, hopefully illustrate what this really looks like. So for the agriculture sector in Sri Lanka, it's about 25% of our population are a part of fisheries and the agriculture sector. And about 88.9 to 90% of the workers, actually, they are informal workers. So their work is quite precarious. And apart from this precarity and other issues like access to resources and land, it's also important to note that the relations and their experience in the sector is also governed by other social relations like gender, ethnicity, class, and caste, which then, of course, impacts the way that they will interact with policy interventions, interact with climate change adaptation projects, climate finance that comes in, and so on. So I'm going to try to share this idea of gender and how gender norms in the agriculture sector is going to limit people's access to resources, mobility, and how this then shapes their adaptive capacity. So in Sri Lanka, women are traditionally expected to have the household, be responsible for household activities, and we say that they have the triple burden: the productive, reproductive, and community role that they play, while men are expected to be the breadwinner. So these identities, interestingly, shape the way people adapt, and this could limit how they adapt to climate change. So this idea of being the breadwinner of the family, for an example, when there are increased floods, when there's a reduction in production due to variation in rainfall or droughts, the household income decreases. So then what happens is men usually either migrate for work or increase the amount of daily wage work that they do. When this happens, of course, the women are kind of left behind in the house, and we see a feminization of the agriculture sector, where even the larger scale agriculture, women are really taking part. And with this feminization, however, men don't kind of completely move on to other forms of employment, especially because of this connection to land. So the most of paddy land in Sri Lanka is state land, at least in the large scale, and people have to kind of cultivate paddy every the yalla season every year, which means that they have to kind of come back to this area at least once a year. So this kind of limits their complete transition to another employment, which in some forms becomes maladaptive because it limits their ability to really fully transition and increase their income. And also, this context we have to set in Sri Lanka with we had the economic crisis, the banning on the chemical fertilizers, which also then really reduced the production. And then when it comes to women, so their household roles, so they also have the unpaid care burden that they have, and other reproductive roles, which also then really limit their mobility. So I want to kind of really share some of the roles women play. So they have this responsibility for household food security. And with the increase in flooding and droughts, what we see is, so women are mostly involved in home gardens in Sri Lanka. So this is really important for household nutrition, and also in larger scale, if they have a larger land, these other crops are also sold for money. So for an example, this year there was intense flooding in most of the areas that we were working in, and they had lost all their produce in their home garden. So in this time of flooding, also the daily labor, the access to this reduces because most of the men work in, let's say, construction, and there is no household daily income during this time. In addition, women who do other daily wage work in other agricultural sectors also don't have access to work because of the flooding. So because of this causes a serious threat to household food security, which then has an income on the children, on education, and so forth. Apart from this, women are also in charge, for an example, with an extension of food security, for foraging for food, for wood, for an example, for wood, right? So during times of flooding, we see that actually women have mobility constraints, and also the time period in which it usually rains has changed. So it's become unpredictable, the volume of rain has increased. So because of this, traditionally, women would usually collect extra wood in times of the monsoon seasons. However, now because of the unpredictability, they are unable to do so, which is then impacting their household food production and so forth. In addition, increasingly, if we look at extreme heat, we see that women usually forage for wood during the daytime, but due to extreme heat, they're unable to do that. And the way they're adapting is actually foraging for wood in groups later in the day. I would, yeah, and I'd also just like to reflect on women's roles in things like poultry, animal husbandry, also impacted by extreme heat with increasing disease. And when we, as in the name of adaptation, really go and provide support either financially or otherwise, by giving poultry and by giving, let's say, livestock, we see that it increases their burden because it's given at household, which then has an impact on their time for care.
You have only one
Sure,
minute.
yes, and their time for care. And in addition, and in addition to that, it because of the climate risk, There is also a risk of loss of the poultry and of the cattle, which then makes these households more vulnerable and also could cause maladaptation. So finally, in some of the work that we are doing, just to make sure we're not excluding people in the margin, it's important for us to consider inclusion in when it comes to really project creation. So it could be as simple as like making sure we're having community consultations at times where women are also available. So not in the morning, not when women have to do other care work. It could be while we introduce technological interventions such as increasing water security, which could be more technological, that we also increase the capacity of communities to govern these technologies and also to really increase their other capacities and adaptive capacities. And just to make sure that during our interventions that we're not really increasing the care burden for women and other marginalized communities. Yes, so that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Azmi, and thank you for bringing in the gender perspective of this issue. Climate change, just like any other issue for that matter, trade or climate change, we did talk about the disproportionate impact on different countries like Southeast Asian, but it is going to impact the vulnerable population more. The impact is not going to be at the same level. So now with that, I would like to open the floor if there are any questions, any directed towards any specific panelists or in general, please, you have the floor. The floor is open. Okay.
So what do you think about the cooperation when it comes to the local level, not just disaster management? So you have early warning systems, you have these action plans.
Who is it directed to? Any specific,
anyone,
just general?
Everyone. So you have these action plans, you have all the early warning systems, but usually what the case is, when you go down to the local level, it's all these national plans don't really translate to local action, whether it's capacity issues of the disaster management people, or it could be the health sector. For example, in Sri Lanka, you have these leptospirosis cases in certain areas, but with highly increasing variability in climate change in locations, now you're finding these cases in like Jaffna. So are the health systems ready? So at the local level, it seems like the challenges are different at different local levels. So the cooperation and to ensure that this you are tackling, you're taking a holistic approach at the local level to increase capacity, and also this addressing these different sectors. I mean, is that a realistic way of approaching this? Because I mean, it's not easy, because we talk about cooperation and coordination, but it's never easy to achieve that. But it seems like climate change, at least at the at the local level, it's affecting many dimensions: education, food security, all these dimensions. So for any of the panelists, how is this local cooperation? How can it be done, and how important is it?
Let us take all the questions and then the panelists will respond. I hope the panelists are taking note of the questions. You have?
I have not a question, but the report you are mentioning. So it's available on the web. Okay.
So any other question? Oh, yes, please.
So my question is if there's any successful business model on the climate insurance. I mean, in the case of Indonesia, before I moved to the fintech industry, I happened to work for the Ministry of Finance in the response to climate change budget. And when it comes to the climate insurance, the government has in Indonesia has heavily subsidized, but the farmers still didn't pick up the climate insurance because they still think, despite the highly subsidized, it's a cost unless the disaster happened. Thank you.
More? Okay, now can the panelists respond? We will not go in the order. Whoever wants to respond. You want the floor? Okay.
Let me thank you. Let me try maybe two issues if you allow me. One is the issue of the local level one. I will give the example. Sorry, because of time I did not go into detail for the particularly the case of the mangrove revetment project, at the same time the heat wave. Let me go one by one. The main limitation of the mangrove revetment is unless the community members are really interested, these projects do not work, of course, apart from resources. And in case of Thailand and partly in Malaysia, the problem is tourism, because you understand most of the tourism places of tourism are coastal areas. I mean, these are very important places. So we have discovered that this is the anecdotal evidence. So sorry, Indonesia one we could not start. Maybe we can start. I could make comment on that. But you are very right. The case of heat wave, I think the main problem is two: very good science, very good early warning, and communicating to the target population that at that time of the day there will be the temperature will be very high. You should avoid. If you are a construction worker, there is a proposal I can share with you that that to ban that the people do not work. I think Middle East is a good example. I'm sure you know that how many, particularly North African and South Asian workers work in that part of the world. That is a very important issue, and that is an advocacy groups make about that. So next one is very important. I think thank you very much for the question about insurance. I think in the last Azerbaijan meeting it also came. Particularly, sorry, I did not talk about climate finance. We all know about that. Yes, that in short, the issue is the penetration, the insurance penetration. That means first is how structured it is. That means the amount of money available. Secondly, it is the issue of the subsidy. Undoubtedly, subsidy plays a key role, particularly for the farm sector. But subsidy has to be adequate so that the corporate sector, mostly the corporate sector, are interested to go to that place. And I think all of us know the operating cost is very high, because the example is Thailand is a good example. They usually subcontract because the big companies don't like to be having offices at the local level. They try to be in the district town, provincial towns. Obvious reason, because they are big companies. If the subsidy is high, they do it. But the point is, again, just to conclude, I'm sorry about the time, is how long you will give the subsidy, how governments do that, and how long. Always there is a question, because it is mostly the taxpayers' money.
Yes, I think you raised a very pertinent question. But in the interest of time, just give 1 minute to each panelist. Is it okay?
On local level, I think I must cite two examples which I think Professor has highlighted. Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan, it's a city level where the heat actions are very critical. And then inspired by Ahmedabad or learned from Ahmedabad, there is a Karachi Heat Action Plan, which is quite successful. Now this is going to many cities in South Asia, learning from each other. So the best part of this consultation, innovative ideas, knowledge sharing. So one city shares with another city, irrespective of any other issues, just sharing of knowledge. On the parametric insurance, I think I try to touch base in my presentation. Digitalization is the way forward. Unless you make system very smart, take parametric insurance, it will not move, it will not scale. My last point is loss and damage fund. There is a group of thoughts that the subsidy that we were talking about, heavy burden on the government, can this loss and damage fund will help to take parametric insurance to benefit especially the most vulnerable due to the climate change. So this is yet another opportunity opening up, and I hope if loss and damage fund institutionalized and support, because parametric insurance is considered as a climate justice instrument, taking risk from a corporate and then somehow reducing the burden from the most vulnerable. So these are some of the opportunities forward. Thank
you. Iqbal?
Well, thank you. I think Dr. Srivastava has already touched upon the climate insurance thing. We can learn from India when they have more than one plans, for example, innovative climate risk insurance plan. Then they have the sandbox agriculture for rural development. And also they have women climate action insurance. So there are some examples that we can learn. And on the local action plan, I think the key is the effective local governments in a country. So if they are politically, fiscally, and administratively empowered. So, for example, in the case of Pakistan, there is a provision in the constitution that there has to be. I mean, we have three levels of government: federal, provincial, and locals. But unfortunately, it's more like a centralized system within the province, that they don't want to uh, devolve the powers, fiscal, administrative, and political powers, to the government, local government. So that's the key. If we have a strong local government system, we can do a lot.
If you have anything just to add on.
So I think regarding the climate insurance, I don't have the information about the successful model yet, but some of the organizations in Nepal, like Practical Actions and others, they have been actively involved in this climate insurance research. But I think it's like a pilot scale, and we still need to know a bit concrete solution. For the involvement at the local level, I think there is a nowadays the concepts of this co-design, co-production, and co-delivery. This has been increasing in various projects. And recently, we at NDRI completed a 5-year study called Tomorrow's Cities Project. It was under the GCRF UK fund, and we had the University of Edinburgh and other Nepal partners, where in that case we had the name suggests tomorrow's cities, not the current cities. The cities which are going to be developed in future, we need to take care of everything so that it's a very disaster risk free or something like that. In that case, we choose some of the cities in various part of the region, including in Nepal, like Kokana and some West Rapti, new cities in Nepal, where in that case the design was like co-designed with the stakeholders down there, local levels. Not only the co-design, but also the co-production, and also the sharing of the information, also co-delivery. So often we only invite the stakeholders in the dissemination or something like that, but that will not work nowadays. So it's like a co-design, co-production, and co-delivery in the whole cycle. We should involve. And also that's why I also emphasize in a conference also we need to invite the policy users as well from the beginning, so that they are well educated. So yeah, thank you very much. Sorry.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, Saima, you have something to add on?
Yes, just a quick point. I just again would like to emphasize that this region needs to come up with the shared solution for the shared problems, and we need to come up with a collective strength of governments, businesses, civil society, and communities all together to drive climate mitigation and adaptation efforts. We need to work on green innovation and technology. Only then we will be able to be able to secure our future in a real resilient manners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saima. I think with that, we come to the end of this session. I must congratulate Dr. Famida, because this was a very, very representative audience, as well as the panel was also very, very represented. So we had the opportunity to listen to various, experiences from different countries. With that, I think with that we come to an end. I hope the objective was fulfilled, and we have a tea break before the next session starts. Thank you all for your attention.